Meeting the love of their life and eloping to get married is something that most teenage girls dream of. CarolineCrouch was no different. A young girl in high school, only 15 years old, was flattered by a financially well-off 27-year-old pilot who flew his helicopter over her school, winning her heart. The two eloped and got married, but what initially seemed like a perfect fairy tale love story would soon turn into a horrifying murder that deceived the world. On Tuesday, May 11, 2021, a man named Harold Lomas, also known as Baboose, was horrifically awakened from his bed. He had rented a 2-story maisonette in the suburbs of Greekcrime, located on the outskirts of Athens, Greece. Baboose didn't have much time to react as 3 men, concealing their identities with hoods, overpowered him. Armed with pistols, they wasted no time tying him up and blindfolding him with duct tape. Unable to do much, Baboose could only listen as the intruders went after his wife, a 19-year-old named CarolineCrouch. The entire incident woke their 11-month-old daughter, who was sleeping nearby. The intruders, speaking with Greek and Albanian accents, repeatedly demanded to know where the money was. Caroline had no idea that what appeared to be a robbery would turn into her murder. CarolineCrouch was born to retired engineer David Crouch and Susan Della Costa on July 12, 2001, in Athens. When she was just 8 years old, the family relocated to the island of Alonissus, where she spent her childhood. They moved because both David and Susan had fallen in love with the coastal surroundings. From a very young age, Caroline embraced her beachside life, becoming passionate about scuba diving and swimming. She met her future husband, Baboose, during a Good Friday parade in 2017. At the time, Baboose was a commercial helicopter pilot, and Caroline was only 15. 3 years later, they got married in Portugal on July 15, 2019. A few days before her murder, Baboose and Caroline purchased a plot of land, planning to build their dream house for themselves and their infant daughter. To facilitate the purchase, Caroline received $50,000 as a gift from her parents. The couple had around $10,000 hidden away in their house for construction costs. At that time, the public in Greece mostly avoided banks as they faced continuous risks of bankruptcy. Therefore, it was common to keep cash stashed away in homes as a safer option. Caroline likely shared this perspective and never anticipated the events of May 11. In a cry for help, Baboose and Caroline, along with their daughter, were tormented with fear as the intruders demanded to know the location of the money. Baboose informed them of where it was hidden, leading the intruders to open the Monopoly board game box and take all the money the couple had set aside for their dream house. However, the intruders did not leave. They continued to rummage from room to room, snatching jewelry and other valuable items. Desperate and fearful, Baboose and Caroline begged for their lives and that of their daughter. Baboose could hear his wife's screams as the intruders held a firearm against their infant daughter. Despite being blindfolded, he struggled against his restraints, but the rope around his neck was tightened to the point of causing him to faint and regain consciousness multiple times. When he finally regained his senses, he discovered that the men had left the house. All he could hear were the painful cries of his daughter. About 30 minutes later, Baboose managed to reach his mobile phone and dial emergency services with his nose. As soon as the call connected, he cried for help, asking emergency services to send an ambulance to his location. However, with duct tape around his mouth, the call consisted of muffled words. The operator on the other end asked Baboose to explain what had happened, but he could only say that robbers had come in. An hour and a half had passed since the intruders broke into their home. First responders arrived at the scene around 6 a.m. When they rushed up the front steps to enter the house, what they found was horrific. Inside, the living space and kitchen were completely destroyed. Drawers were open and emptied, with clothing and other belongings scattered across the area. Among the mess was an open Monopoly box, the same box where Baboose and Caroline had hidden the money. The first responders also found a security camera on the couch. It appeared to have been ripped off the wall. A white and brown husky puppy, Roxy, was found hanging from her leash in the staircase, having been strangled. Baboose was discovered on the floor of the main bedroom, with duct tape covering his eyes and mouth, reaching his neck, and his hands and feet restrained. Lying face down on the bed was CarolineCrouch, while their infant daughter was beside her, crying and trying to wake her mother. Caroline was declared dead. While their daughter was visibly distressed, she appeared unharmed. First responders noted Caroline's pale skin and concluded that she had been murdered. Babus went into visible shock when he was freed from his restraints and saw the corpse of his wife, the woman he had loved for the past 5 years. Officers quickly ensured the infant's safety and began interrogating Babus based on his account of the events and the state of the crime scene. The presence of 4 men was determined. Police concluded that 3 men had entered the house while a 4th kept watch. The sequence of events up to the murder and escape unfolded as follows. The intruders approached the house through a dirt road leading to the back entrance. They failed to break in through the rear door and removed security pins from a basement window to gain entry. After entering the maisonette, they killed Roxy, the family's husky. The 3 men then entered the main bedroom where Babus and Caroline were asleep. They ransacked the house and took the money from the Monopoly box. Before leaving, they smothered Caroline with a pillow. Given that Babus was drifting in and out of consciousness, the intruders may have believed he was dead and left, thinking they had no witnesses. As for Caroline's death, it was revealed that the attack lasted about 6 minutes. Bruises across her body indicated signs of retaliation, and marks on her lips and tongue suggested that sharp objects were used. No signs of sexual assault were found. Despite the significant damage done to the couple's house, no concrete evidence was left behind by the intruders. The only thing responders found was the hood of one of the intruders, which likely fell off during the struggle. Babus was able to provide a sketch depicting a tall, overweight, dark-skinned individual based on the details he shared. Despite being disoriented, Babus could identify 2 firearms used in the attack, a black pistol and a silver Colt. Details revealed that the intruders stole $10,000 in cash and $20,000 worth of jewelry. Police determined that this was the work of professional criminals who had likely observed the family and waited for the right moment to strike. A police spokesperson categorized the crime as brutal and violent, indicating it was carried out by someone with a lack of emotions and a strong antisocial personality. As details of the investigation emerged, numerous speculations arose. If money was the motive, why was murder necessary? Some claims suggested that the intruders were high on drugs and unable to control their actions. Others believed Caroline might have recognized them and resisted, necessitating her silencing, given her history as a black belt kickboxer. Experts posited that Caroline may have begun to scream when her infant daughter was threatened with a gun. However, investigators were certain that the attack was premeditated. They suspected the intruders knew the couple had money hidden away in the house. Following this line of inquiry, police questioned Babus and Caroline's inner circle, suspecting the gang received inside information. They scrutinized security camera footage from nearby homes and businesses and identified a dark vehicle followed by a motorcycle that cruised around the couple's house on the morning of the murder. CarolineCrouch was laid to rest 3 days after her murder on the Greek island of Alonissos, the same place where her parents had fallen in love and where she grew up. Babus paid tribute to his wife, stating he was lucky to have met Caroline, lucky that she loved him, and even luckier that she was the mother of his daughter. He expressed sorrow that their daughter would not remember her mother and remarked how Caroline was the joy of his life, always near him through their child. While Caroline was being laid to rest, a car was pulled over in northeast Greece during a routine stop. Inside was a 36-year-old Georgian national, Georgi Harides, on his way to the Bulgarian border. He submitted his passport, which soon turned out to be fake. Who was this man, and how was he related to Caroline's murder? This individual was soon identified as Georgi Harides, a violent criminal with multiple prior convictions. He was wanted for 12 break-ins committed across Athens over the past 6 months. Linking him to Caroline's case was significant, as 3 of these crimes occurred in Babus and Caroline's neighborhood. One of those cases involved breaking into a house through a rear window, much like what had happened at their home. During that robbery, the group dragged the female occupant by her hair, threatening to slit her throat while stealing $10,000 in cash and valuables. Their next hit occurred just 2 months before Babus and Caroline's tragedy. During that robbery, they tied up an elderly couple along with their cleaning lady. Adding to the evidence against Harides was his striking resemblance to the sketch created from Babus' description of the intruder. The police had strong reasons to believe they'd found their man. Harides was arrested and detained for 4 days, during which time physical methods were employed to obtain answers. He was repeatedly questioned about entering the house and killing Caroline, but he continually professed his innocence. Despite the physical pressure, he maintained that he had never heard of CarolineCrouch, and the police's evidence came up dry. After being cleared of involvement in Caroline's murder, 3 police officers faced demotion from the Athens homicide squad. Continuing the investigation, the police turned their attention to a local Albanian organized crime group. Initially, they had a list of 100 potential suspects, which was narrowed down to 10 known criminals, identified as part of the red list. Babus was shown mugshots of each individual, but police withheld further details. As the case remained unresolved, public patience waned amid a rise in racially motivated crimes. Information on Caroline's case grew scarce, even with substantial monetary rewards going unclaimed. Residents of Athens lived in fear, not knowing who would be the next victim. Media reports indicated that this was not an ordinary case, and if it were, it would have been solved quickly. Investigators revealed there were no fingerprints or DNA found at the scene. Caroline's family remained grateful for the ongoing pursuit of justice. Babus expressed his hope that what happened to him would never happen to anyone else. He supported police efforts and stayed in the media spotlight to keep Caroline's case alive, even engaging on social media to thank the public for their support. A breakthrough came on June 17, 37 days after Caroline's murder, during a small memorial service held for her. Attendees noticed detectives present at the ceremony, and after it concluded, they discreetly approached Babus, asking him to accompany them to Athens. At that point, investigators had uncovered significant information about the case. Details revealed inconsistencies in Babus's account. He initially claimed the intruders broke in through the basement window, which was too small for anyone of the alleged physique to enter. Additionally, neighbors reported no sounds of violence and only heard the puppy crying in distress. The house didn't show signs of being trashed, and there were no cries for help or distress signals from the infant. Caroline's smartwatch monitored her pulse, revealing that while she was asleep at 3:58 a.m., her pulse rose by 50% at 4:05 a.m., indicating severe stress, and ultimately stopped at 4:11 a.m., which was before Babus claimed the murder occurred. Contrary to Babus' assertion that he was tied up, data from his fitness app indicated he was moving around at that time. Police attempts to reenact Babus dialing emergency services were unsuccessful. Further investigation revealed Caroline had attempted to book a hotel for herself and her daughter on the night of her murder. Text messages sent to a friend indicated she was contemplating leaving Babus. When Babus initially met Caroline, he was on holiday while living on Alonissos, where his mother taught at Caroline's school. He was charismatic, clever, and well-off, capturing Caroline's attention by flying a helicopter over her school. What seemed like a fairy tale would soon morph into a nightmare for Caroline. Caroline believed they were a perfect match and confided in her family about her happiness. Babus proposed shortly after they began dating. She was underage but turned 18 3 days later. After exchanging vows, the couple settled in Kalivia, where Caroline pursued her college studies while Babus continued his flying career. Their social media presence portrayed them as a joyful couple, filled with love and romance. Yet Caroline's diary revealed a different narrative. In her diary, she often questioned her relationship. In 2019, Caroline wrote about serious fights with Babus, contemplating leaving and going to her sister. Over time, Babus became increasingly manipulative and controlling. Their elopement, which seemed romantic, was actually an attempt to isolate her. After the marriage, Babus was the sole provider, while Caroline remained a university student with hardly any money. Despite financial support from her mother, it would often be claimed by Babus. In her writings, Caroline expressed her deep love for Babus, admitting that their relationship was painful. In one entry, she described a tearful confrontation, expressing a desire to leave but feeling trapped due to her pregnancy. She wrote, "I stayed with him so my daughter would not grow up without 2 parents." Another entry referenced a house in Athens, symbolizing the instability of her illusionary fairy tale. What began as a love story had transformed into an abyss of pain and despair, an insurmountable situation from which she felt unable to escape. Hours before her murder, text messages displayed escalating arguments between her and Babus, highlighting the deteriorating state of their relationship. The investigators soon informed Babus that he was now the prime suspect. They presented overwhelming evidence demonstrating the inconsistencies in his initial account. Babus underwent an 8-hour interrogation, eventually confessing but weaving a fabricated story. He claimed that an argument had ensued on the night Caroline was killed, asserting that she threatened to leave with their daughter, which pushed him to lose control. According to his confession, Caroline had been the aggressive one, physically assaulting him. Overwhelmed, he stated he then strangled her with a pillow, resulting in murder in front of their child. He contemplated disposing of the body but concluded that it would be impossible to carry out. The thought of framing someone else emerged, leading him to stage a home invasion. To add authenticity to his setup, he killed Roxy, placed their child beside Caroline's corpse, and restrained himself with ropes and duct tape. While he expressed remorse, he attempted to shift blame onto Caroline, saying he had become unstable after the birth of their child, a girl who would grow up never knowing her mother. The case, dubbed "The Murder That Fooled the World," unraveled as Babus grew overconfident he might evade justice. In May 2022, he was charged and found guilty of premeditated murder, obstruction of justice, lying to authorities, and animal abuse.